So, this island has just the one coconut tree. If I could figure out a way to cut the tree down, I could maybe use it for firewood to make an SOS smoke signal and try and get rescued. But if that doesn't work, I've lost my only source of food and water. What a predicament.
What a predicament!
Welcome to What a Predicament, the only podcast coming from this specific tiny desert island in the South Pacific. I'm Alex, thanks for finding this and for downloading it. I've been stranded on this island for the last week, and recording this podcast is the only thing keeping me sane, I think. I don't have a Wilson, I've just got you, with nothing to do all day but shuck some coconuts. And I've decided to use all this free time to help solve some other people's predicaments. And this week's predicament is one I can share with you because it's something I've had to overcome myself in my personal life. The first step I took in starting my own podcast was just Google searching around some do's and don'ts. And one predicament I was faced with early on was using sound effects. What sounds can I legally use? And what would land me in more trouble than I'm already in, being stranded on a desert island with no hope of rescue? Out of necessity, I've had to delve into the world of Foley. Not all podcasts use sound effects. A podcast like Bill Burr's or Joe Rogan's, well, they can do great podcasts and they're great comedians who can hold your attention just by talking for an hour or more, unaided by clips or sound effects. But, we can't all be so lucky. Some of us aren't funny, okay? Some of us, we need to use clips and sound effects in the hope that, high production values will distract from our naively conceived and lazily researched podcasts, We aren't all witty on the spot, Bill Burr. We can't all have one unbroken, consistently engaging conversation for 3.5 hours, Joe Rogan. Some of us have to actually spend hours before recording, writing their scripts and faking a drawn-out emotional breakdown, just to pad out a paltry 15 minutes, itself ripping off a bit by comedian Stuart Lee, which luckily won't be picked up by anyone listening, because no one's listening and, nor should they. I spoke with Brian Nimmons, CEO of Sound Ideas, the largest sound effects provider in the world, about what I would get from my money if I shelled out for a top-of-the-line sound effects library.
With the purchase of our libraries, you get a license. You can use it in your productions for as long as you want. It's a buyout, but there are strict restrictions. Like you can only post it or synchronize it within a production for release. There are no royalties that are paid on sound effects, unlike music. But it's basically you pay once and you use it forever. But you can only use it in synchronization of film or a video or commercial. Or you can't turn around and use those sounds and then resell them as sound effects. That's prohibited, of course.
That would be option one, but with a budget of $0, I had to find a way to get access to sound effects with a little more hands-on approach. Foleying. Wikipedia defines Foleying thusly. Foley is the reproduction of everyday sound effects that are added to film, video, and other media in post-production to enhance audio quality. These reproduced sounds can be anything from the swishing of clothes and footsteps to squeaky doors and breaking glass. The best Foley art is so well integrated into a film that it goes unnoticed by the audience. It helps create a sense of reality within a scene. Without these crucial background noises, movies feel unnaturally quiet and uncomfortable. Unnaturally quiet and uncomfortable. Sounds like a bit of me. A famous example of Foley work was the great gag in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, right in the beginning of the film where you hear the horse clip-clopping up the hill, and then the knights come into view and they're on foot with the squire knocking together a couple of coconuts behind them. And my personal experience with Foley goes back much further than What a Predicament. When I was little, I'd make fake little radio shows and stories on a cassette player I had that had a built-in microphone. It had 2 tape decks on it, one of those ones, so you could dub a song off one tape onto a fresh blank one and then like record your fake voice breaks between the songs and make little radio shows. And my sisters and I would even make fake ads and jingles and come up with ways to do all the sound effects just with what we had lying around. One I can remember was after some skit we improvised where my sister pulled a prank on me, and in retaliation on the skit I beat her up, and we smacked around a bucket of Lego and kind of spilled all these Lego to simulate her teeth, breaking and coming out and spilling on the floor. The years have gone by now, and somehow I'm still doing similar things, not assaulting my sister, Foleying sound effects. In a previous episode of the podcast, I was swallowed by a baleen whale, which I'll admit was traumatic, something I'm still coming to terms with. But unfortunately, as I learned, you don't always get the best audio under those conditions. So in the interest of full disclosure, those weren't all real whale cries, I had to overdub some after the fact, after I managed to escape. Now, this is something I just couldn't have done on that old cassette player. Thanks to the digital revolution, I could just make this awkward noise. And then I could use Pro Tools to pitch it down. And add some heavy reverb and whale cry. So while I have a little bit of experience, I thought it would be best to talk to a pro about everything Foley. Estelle Clifford is a former Foley artist at the New Zealand Film Unit.
That's the company that's now owned by Peter Jackson. So now it's called Park Road Post. So I worked for it before he bought it. Actually, I've got a really great story about when he was buying it. He came to the old building and he was showing some people around, and I guess that was like the people who were investing money. And I was having a really shitty day in the Foley suite, and I was chucking my toys a bit. I was having a bit of a tanty. Things weren't going right, and I was throwing a whole lot of stuff, and I happened to throw a whole lot of stuff at the door just as he opens it and brings in some people to be like, "And this is our beautiful Foley pit suite," and things kind of hurled past their faces as the door opened, and yeah. Hi, Sir Peter Jackson.
I was curious whether he'd be hands-on with that sort of stuff. I could imagine if he was someone like Stanley Kubrick, he'd be like, "No, you're stamping the boot the wrong way. It has to be with this much force, and you've got a size 12. This is clearly supposed to be..."
I think with his early films, he was probably doing a lot of it and all of it anyway. But I think once you become big and you're working on massive films like Lord of the Rings, which is I was doing a lot of the spots that we're picking up there, because there was an Australian team and some of us back in New Zealand doing it. He just doesn't have time, and he trusts that you're a professional. I don't really know that I was, but he's got to let the other people do those things. And there's a whole team that do the mixing and the editing down before it even gets to his ears. So no, he trusts that people are going to do their thing and just hang out. So
could you recap some of the major projects you've worked on?
Sure. So at the New Zealand Film Unit, we did a lot of New Zealand TV shows. So Street Legal with Jay Lagaya was a really big one for the film unit. The Tribe, I don't know if they aired fully in New Zealand, but it was a massive show and really long seasons. Also The Strip, which was filmed in Wellington, so it was really great to keep the sound local for that as well. And then as we were kind of petering out on that, Lord of the Rings. So obviously Lord of the Rings took up years and years, and it was really great because it employed a lot of people and it kept the industry really busy, especially in Wellington. So the main part of Foley for Lord of the Rings was done by an Australian team, but there were things that were missed or they needed some extra help, and so we were kind of like the backup crew. And that was probably the most intense. It's all intense. It's really physical, and you really have to get involved. And you're watching things in slow mo for ages to be able to follow and do the timing of different spots or feet or effects that you're doing. So it was a big project and a long project, but really exciting. But a little, perhaps more, everything had to be quite fine-tuned because it's going on a massive screen and a worldwide thing. So that job was quite intense. But so that's probably some of the main stuff that people would know about.
How do you get a job like that?
Oh my gosh, it really is so old school. It's like who you know. I had done a year at New Zealand Film and Television Training School. It was based in Christchurch at the time that I was doing it before it moved to Wellington. And a friend of mine who was in the course, she got a job it was like an intern at the film unit. And they loved her, and she's doing a really good job. So she started in the pits doing the feet and some Foley, and then they needed a new recordist. So she switched around, went to the other side of the glass, and started recording people. And they had a couple of other girls who'd been doing a lot of the work. Dancers do a lot of Foley. They're really good at it because their timing and being able to follow people's movements, I think, naturally comes to a dancer. And she's just like, oh my God, I really need someone else the girls are away for a couple of weeks. I need someone else. I think you'll be really good at it. So she brought me in, and the rest is kind of history. So I had some background in understanding what it was. I was a real soundie already anyway. And by mistake, I kind of happened to be there. And it was run by a lot of guys. Guys like having a few girls round, young girls.
So that's how you get
terrible.
the job.
Oh, I slept my way to the top.
That answers
No.
my question.
I didn't. I promise I didn't. Us two girls in the booth together. It was, I guess, through a friend, I got a really good gig and it was cool.
To take it right back to the beginning,
Yep.
how would you define Foley? What is it for those who have no experience in the biz, like you Hollywood types?
Yeah. So Foley is the sound effects or the sounds associated generally to people and things that are happening. So it's not so much your big car smashes and all the special effects that get put together. Originally, Foley came from radio, so radio plays. And they didn't have, in the early 1900s, they didn't have special effects or equipment or recording or computers. And so the noises were all made, right? So if someone was walking, you'd put in the footsteps, someone's coming to the door, you knock on the door, someone's picking up a bottle, you pick up the bottle. And it was all done live on the spot.
Classic cardboard for like thunder wobble.
That's really exciting stuff. And then film started moving into... So it had the silent era and it moved into sound as well. And so these Foley people who'd been doing the radio, named after a guy, someone or other Foley is where it came from, they realised, oh my gosh, how do we do this? So the thing is they didn't have the equipment to record all the sounds on set. The main focus was record the actor doing their lines because you don't have to pay for them to come back and do any more of that or film it again. So you focus on your miking the performer and their words. And then after that, to make things sound real, you've got to have all the other sounds. So when you move, your clothes make noises, your feet make noises. You might brush past something that has a noise. So if you don't have those things, the atmosphere in the room sounds empty and weird and like a studio. So it's giving reality to the sound that you hear when you're watching TV or film. So again, it's real basic things like it could be shaking hands, it could be kissing someone, it's the cloth, it's the footsteps, it's the rustle of the trees. Yeah, that kind of thing. And
what are the tools of your trade?
Oh my gosh, pretty much everything. When I was at the film unit, it was, you had a massive, huge space and it was like an op shop. So the shelves were just filled of glass and cutlery and old jars. And I mean, you just collect stuff. You're like, oh, yep. I'll take this. And it was kind of like the rubbish tip. Anything can be anything else. And it is a little bit about using your imagination. The main thing for footsteps is you have pits. And in each pit, which is probably around about maybe 3 inches laid down into the floor, you'd have a wooden one and you'd have concrete, you'd have dirt, you'd have maybe some sand. So the main kind of things that you'd walk on. And sometimes you'd have to run out and cut down a branch of a tree and chuck that in your sand pit so that you could walk and make it sound like you're walking on grass or through the bushes or whatever. And the rest is junk. You collect junk. We had half an old car in the booth, so you could close doors and put your hands against cars. Old furniture. It really was it's like a junk store.
What are some of the more weirder requests that you've had to come up with?
Oh, and those are the weird things you do. You end up walking around a room with the microphone beside you, just tapping and knocking on stuff for the person recording you. it's kind of their responsibility to go, yeah, that definitely has the right sound, or I think you're doing a good thing. Pashing. Pashing is always something that needs a sound effect, and they might not have caught that properly on set. So with the strip, which was all about lots of love scenes and things, you have to do a lot of that. I guess it's not necessarily a weird one to make. It's just that you have to do that old thing, like when you're a 10 learning to kiss, you have to use your hand a lot. So that's kind of strange. My fingernails, a little bit long, I guess, and they made great dog footsteps on gravel and concrete, which, again, you might search for ages thinking, oh my gosh, what should I use? But it turns out that your own hands and your nails yourself can be a little dog running across the floor. A dried up sponge was what I always used to have toast. If someone had popped toast and you're spreading anything on toast, just like one of those dry kitchen sponges, worked pretty good.
Have you ever been watching a production that you were involved in and heard something and gone, oh, that's my footstep or that's my toast?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my toast. A lot of the squeaking of bed noises in the strip were mine. Wow, proud moment. There is a scene in Lord of the Rings where Gollum is in the caves and he's freaking out about the ring, and all the twisting of his feet, his wet feet on the rocks. That's all me. It's like about 2 days' work of squatting down in the pit. Like it's quite physically demanding as well. You're holding that squat position, the mic's down low. You can't breathe when you're a Foley artist. That's the other thing that probably need to explain. You have a microphone either directly at your feet or on the spot noise that you're about to make. So say you're like picking up a bottle and then putting it back down. You want to mic that quite hot, which sometimes means it's quite close to you. You literally cannot breathe, because if you get that and I'm breathing in the background, it's not a clean sound to then boom out in your cinema speakers. So you also have to learn to kind of move and do things without making much noise yourself.
And of course the microphones would be calibrated to get these quiet sounds, because it's not like a singer or something. That's right. You're trying to pick up a subtle rustle of fabric.
Some of them are really directional, and some of them you can pull away and come in a little bit, because you might be following the movement of the performer, of the actor. So that can change things. But yeah, a lot of the time you're having to hold back. But yeah, all Gollum's slippery little feet in that cave scene are all mine, and I feel quite proud of those.
That's a claim to fame. I didn't realise who I was getting on the podcast.
I know, right?
You talked about, speaking of Lord of the Rings, you talked about having a bit of a freak out when PJ happened to be on set.
Yeah.
What's a bad day in a Foley office? Like, what makes a bad day?
I think when you just can't get something done, because it's slow going as it is. You literally are. You do everything to the timing of what's happening on the screen in front of you. So the film or the scene has been shot, and it's played on a TV screen that you're looking at, and do the same movements, and sometimes your timing is just completely out. If you're a bit tired, if you had a late night the night before, not highly recommended. Things just not going right, or you just can't quite find the right sound. There might be something that they're working really hard to be like, no, I really need something there, and you just can't figure out. Sometimes you have that block mentally of being creative, of how to find a particular sound if it's not an obvious thing you have to find. And
you're not in a position where you can walk away and come back to it because there's deadlines.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've got to get this much work done in this set of time because we need it edited and done to the rest of the team. We've got to put it together by 5 o'clock tonight or whatever.
So on the flip side, what's a good day? Do you have a best day ever?
Some days you are just acing it. Like you're like, yeah, that sounded so great, and you're doing a really good job, and you're really in tune with what you're watching on the screen, and your timing is epic. Yeah, and I guess that maybe is an energy thing, because your energy comes and goes for it, and I think it's just, yeah, sometimes you overthink stuff. So maybe those days when you're a bit more relaxed and you're not thinking too hard.
So what would you say the traits are that make a good Foley artist?
Someone who has really good timing. So I think musically and physically, so again, I guess that's why it leads to maybe a dancer or a performer already. I mean, I've already got an acting background, so I think that I kind of intuitively can feel and sense where a performer is going to go on the screen. If you're following their footsteps, or you're following them picking up and putting down,
their energy,
or they're rustling. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that probably... just someone who kind of has a little bit of timing, and you get beeped in, right? So you're like 3 peeps, beep, 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 just like old school radio, the news is coming. And on the next peep is your thing to do. So again, it's all about timing, and maybe a slight musical background in some ways gives you that rhythm. It's better to pick that up.
Did you want to make some?
Yeah, go on.
Well, cheers to you. Don't rightly think having this campfire down at this old graveyard was the brightest of ideas, but...
Come on, Pa, it's awesome. Wait, what was that?
Oh, now don't get spooked now. That's just some thunder.
But what was that?
Oh, well, that was just a ghost. A what? A ghost? Let's settle up. Let's get out of here.
Hi-ho, Silver!
Thanks to my guests Estelle Clifford and Brian Nimmons from Sound Ideas. You can hear more from Brian about all things sound effects, or SFX, which is a term they use in the biz, apparently, back in episode 2 of What a Predicament, titled The Sound Effect You Can't Unhear. You can find that episode and all of the episodes I've done at whatacat.co.nz. The opening theme music for this podcast is a derivative of The Little Hotel of Horrors by Decamentarium, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 4.0. This podcast is a What a Cat production. If all this sound designing stuff sounds a bit too complex for you and you want me to do it for you, I'm your guy. Email me, Alex, at whatacatproductions@gmail.com. If you have 5 seconds up your sleeve and you feel like I deserve it, you can subscribe and rate What a Predicament on iTunes. It helps me get this podcast out there, get some exposure, and hopefully get my listeners into the double digits one day. You know, we all have dreams. This is all with the inevitable goal of getting sponsors for the show so I can sell out and forget all you guys who were down since day one and, you know, just be sitting there sipping single malt whiskey on some cruise ship. I was almost going to say on a beach somewhere, but I am on a beach somewhere currently on an island in the South Pacific, and I've had no whiskey. In fact, I've had nothing to drink for the last week other than seawater and coconut water. I could do a whole What a Predicament episode on chucking a coconut. It's like a whole thing. Although, here we go. What's that? Oh, it's a boat! Oh, a police boat, no less! Finally! Oh, emergency services, I'm saved! Oh, thank goodness you guys are here.
Stay right where you are and put your hands up.
You're under arrest.
You're going away for a long time.
You're going down, mister.
Oh, you're going a long
You
way
can't-
down.
no.
We're gonna lock you up and throw away
Stop
the
it,
key.
you don't understand. What are the charges? Oh, what? Because these seagull sound effects? Oh, come on, I tried recording seagulls. What's the harm? What are you doing? It's fair use, surely. Oh, no, don't. That's another sound effect. You're making it worse. The long reach of the law is as long as its name suggests. Now I'm rotting away in a prison cell on this police boat, which apparently they have, and it looks like I might be here a while, so please check back in next week for a whole new predicament.
Yeah, that sounded so great, and you're doing a really good job.